Hi, this is Justin for CGT345, and this week I built a small obstacle course using Blueprint to create custom objects and effects. So the first half of the obstacle course just tests out each of the blueprints individually, and the second half tests them out in a more complex way. So on the second half of the obstacle course, the player is meant to use the boost in conjunction with the geyser to clear a small gap, and the second half, they're supposed to avoid the geyser so they don't get thrown into a pit of spikes on the ceiling, and they have to use the geyser on the end to propel them up to this third platform, use the boost, but be able to control boost enough to dodge the spikes and land on the final platform. BP Death is just the spikes, and all it does, it casts to the first person character, checks their health value, and decreases it by 3. BP Geyser, I didn't get it to work completely, but what it's supposed to do is push the player up into the air. So when the scenes start, all it does is emit steam at a height of z equals 50, which is supposed to be the height which the player is propelled. The player overlaps with the geyser, it checks the movement and the current velocity of the character. Then it's supposed to multiply this 3D vector with z-axis of 7, which is supposed to push them up in the air, but I didn't get it to work properly. BP Boost is supposed to speed up the player's current movement. It checks the player, and then much like BP Fire, it attaches a particle emitter to the player's mesh. It also tries to find its velocity and multiplies that in the X and Y directions. However, this didn't work either. This speed increase lasts for 3 seconds and then deactivates. It's supposed to make controlling the player much harder than it usually is by increasing its speed very quickly. BP Fire is the most complex one that I've built, and it can be split up into 3 parts. So the first part is purely cosmetic. All it does is check the cube's location, and the cube is the physical part of the blueprint. So it checks the cube's location, and it spawns two particle emitters at the location, which are fire and smoke. The second part of a blueprint is simple. It just toggles a boolean that checks whether or not the player is overlapping or not. So if the player is overlapping, it will spawn a particle emitter on the actual player that follows them around for a set amount of time. So the third part of the blueprint occurs every tick, and what it does, it checks to see whether or not the player is currently overlapping. If it is, then it waits 1 second, checks the player's health value, then decreases it by 1 for every second. If the player is not overlapping anymore, it waits 0.5 seconds, then deactivates the particle emitter attached to the player when they first overlap the object. Finally, I did a few tweaks to the first-person player blueprint. That comes included within Unreal, and all that does is, so the player has a health of 10. Every tick, it checks to see if the health is less than 1. If it is, then it destroys the mesh and prints the string out dead. Else, it just prints out the player's current health. And this is how I've managed to put some small amount of consequences into this obstacle course that doesn't work.